Well, that was how do I sum that race up? It was really processional. It's rather boring. Not a lot really happened, and for a Turkish Grand Prix in the wet, I feel it was extremely disappointing. Not to say that it was overly a bad race, as we still saw some really decent overtaking from Hamilton, good attacks on Sergio Perez, and we saw Carlos Sainz cutting through the field, as well as it was a sort of suspenseful race. But just nothing really happened. And with that, I've got my phone full of notes. I've just finished watching the Channel 4 highlights. It is now currently 8:30 in the evening, and we can now start the review. And we will quickly just go on over the Drivers' Championship and where we stand at the moment. It is Max Verstappen who has retaken the championship lead. This is the 4th time it has changed in 6 races. And that gap at the top is just 6 points. That is so slim, with Valtteri Bottas now comfortably clear of Lando Norris in P4, who is 10 points ahead of Sergio Perez, with the 2 Ferraris just half a point away from each other. Then moving on into the Constructors' World Championships, it looks a little like this. Mercedes extend their lead by just 2 points, 3 points actually, courtesy of Valtteri Bottas' bonus point for the fastest lap, to 36 points overall, and just 7.5 between Ferrari and McLaren. Now, this is a slightly new addition that I've made, courtesy of a comment made a couple of videos ago. This shows the gap to the championship leader versus the points remaining. The points remaining being the steep, constant declining line all the way down to Abu Dhabi, and then the points to the current championship leader is everybody else. And we can see that the drivers above the points remaining are therefore mathematically out of the championship, and that is Esteban Ocon and lower are mathematically out of the championship hunt. But what we will do now is we will go on over the Audience Prediction Championships, the series in which you guys, the audience, can get involved if you catch the video that gets released on the Thursdays of the race weekend on my channel. And the leaderboard for the Turkish Grand Prix looks a little like this. It is Libra777 who takes the victory, scoring 18 out of 25 points, 1 clear of Arturo Salazar, and 2 clear of Elliott and Mika Hakkinen. Current championship leader Evan Darcy is again up there, but on 14 so far, joint with F1 Kerala, Min Verstappen, Object Maniac Lewis. Then we've got a Doctor Who channel on 13, and myself on 7. I had a doozy set of predictions. Which means that for the total seasons tally, it looks a little like this. Evan Darcy is on 213, 23 points clear of Joe Bischow. That is quite a comfortable lead, with Arturo Salazar on 182 and myself joint on 165 with both Elliott and also Hal Lowe. Hal and me have been in a season-long battle all the way up to now, where we are joint on 165. There are then, of course, a couple other people who have just joined the 100-point club. This is Divot Rayhan, Libra777, and Mattia Bonotto as well. Leroy, you are so close to the 100-point club. Just one more race and you'll be there. We do then have the second half of this leaderboard, which looks a little something like this. People like White River that have entered into a few races, Sid Hunt as well, Andre 13, with the second leaderboard looking a bit like this for the people who haven't quite entered into every single race of the season so far, with the second half of this leaderboard looking a bit like this. If you see your name up here, don't worry, you haven't entered into too many, so you're not exactly expected to climb super high up this leaderboard. With the final one, I believe it's an abrupt animation which I still haven't fixed, looks a little like this. There are 129 unique individual entries into this series, which I cannot thank you guys enough for that. That is absolutely awesome to see. And what I have also done is created an average points for the entries that you have made. So just because some people have entered into more races than yourselves, if you see yourself high up in this average leaderboard, then you know you are an exceptionally good predictor. And so that leaderboard looks a little bit like this. It is Schlank and Tushar Singh joint on 16 out of 25 for the entries that they have made, which just to the right of their name is 1 and 2 respectively. With Evan Darcy, the current championship leader, on 15 entries with an average score of 14.2 for those 15 entries. That is absolutely mega, with Danielle B being the next closest person in the double digits of entries, 13.4 for 13 entries. And then scrolling down this leaderboard here, we get a lot of people that are joint on 11 and 11.5 as well, with the second leaderboard looking a bit like this, with the second half of this leaderboard scrolling down a little bit further. There are lots of people that have single digits worth of entries, but again, if you see yourself high up in this leaderboard, you know you are a good predictor. With again, a slightly abrupt animation which I haven't had the time to fix, the last leaderboard looks something like this. So there is all of the Audience Prediction Championships and the World Championships all done and dusted. What we're going to do now is go through a couple of the notes that I've made. There really aren't that many from the highlights on Channel 4, and just sort of talk through the Turkish Grand Prix. First up, we have a very orderly start, apart from Fernando Alonso's spin, which is very akin to Valtteri Bottas last year, when he spun 5 times, where he spun at the start, was punted by Pierre Gasly, who subsequently got a penalty, and then Alonso called him stupid, and then Alonso then went on to go and punt Mick Schumacher and also got a penalty himself. So Schumacher had a very compromised race because of that, and then also Fernando had a very, very compromised race because of the spin with Gasly. Starting in... where did Alonso start? P5 or P6, I think, after Hamilton's penalty. He was expected to get some decent points for Alpine, and then to be punted off and spun round, it's a big, big shame. It sort of cost us... it cost us a lot in this race, I think. Because again, that would have just been one more car for the likes of Hamilton and also Sainz that are charging through the field to catch up to and pass. It would have been really interesting to see what Hamilton would have done. Then next up, I've got Hamilton is making some really nice moves on Vettel, Tsunoda and also Stroll. Then add into that Lando Norris. And then equally, Sainz is also pushing extremely hard through the field. Very, very nice. Some of those moves were fairly bog standard, but some of them were nice karting moves, as lots of people like to say, where they sort of take tighter lines on the inside and they just sort of run round on the outside. It's very, very good stuff from Lewis Hamilton and also Carlos Sainz, who I think had a... how do I explain this? So Sainz pushed through the field much, much quicker than Lewis Hamilton, so he was able to put in more of these really nice moves, but Sainz was of course passing the slightly easier cars to pass than Lewis Hamilton was. And it's at this point we get to the middle of the race, as Daniel Ricciardo is struggling big time and can't even pass George Russell, so he comes in for a new set of intermediate tyres and goes even slower and now can't even catch Nicholas Latifi. It was a very disappointing race for Daniel Ricciardo. He started at the back due to changing all sorts of different things in the power unit, along with Carlos Sainz as well, and then just couldn't drive forwards. We clearly could, because we were watching Carlos Sainz do it, yet Ricciardo couldn't. Whether it was the Ferrari working extremely well at Turkey, like it was last year, or McLaren and Daniel Ricciardo just not quite gelling with the circuit in any way, shape or form. But yeah, very disappointing from Daniel Ricciardo, struggling to even catch and then pass a Williams. Not ideal. Then next up on the list is Hamilton versus Perez. I think that was the battle of the race. Mainly because it was pretty much the only battle of the race. All of the other ones with Hamilton and Sainz were just sort of straightforward passes, whereas this one was an actual decent battle. Perez not giving an inch. It looked like Hamilton had got it done coming into the turn 12, 13, 14 complex towards the pit entry and the start-finish straight. It looked like he'd got the move done on the outside, and then he just didn't. Perez actually stuck it to Hamilton, and that was awesome. Awesome to watch down the main straight, side by side. Again, Hamilton just a nose in front, half a car length in front, if that. And then Perez just outbraked him into the first corner. Something you wouldn't have expected to see whatsoever, but something that is so, so awesome to see at the same time. And roughly at this sort of time, it was when Vettel went on to mediums. He was definitely the most vocal about going on to slick tyres, but it really wasn't the right call, as I full on just jabbed myself in the eye, but not a good call whatsoever from Vettel to go onto the mediums. With Leclerc holding out as best he could against Valtteri Bottas, but his slicked immediate tyres, which he was trying to hold on to for the rest of the race, just sort of collapsed on him, and he lost so much lap time. As his engineer said, if you can keep Bottas behind you for the next 15 laps, you'll finish in first, but if you lose out to Valtteri Bottas, you're going to drop like a stone. And he absolutely did drop like a stone, and that's going to lead me on nicely into Lewis Hamilton and that sort of saga with his team. So ultimately, benefit of hindsight, Hamilton should have pitted at exactly the same point, if not a couple of laps earlier / after Valtteri Bottas. When they had that information from Bottas, knowing that the intermediate tyres go through that graining phase in the first couple of laps, he easily should have pitted then. I can kind of see why they split the strategies, because a couple of drivers at that time, Charles Leclerc, Esteban Ocon, who did go all the way to the end, were staying out and the lap times were staying. But what they didn't expect was the tyres to just plummet like they did for Leclerc, and that was the main worry. There was about a 4.5 second gap from Hamilton to Verstappen, and then there was a 13 and a bit second gap down to Perez. Leclerc then comes into the pits after Bottas goes past, and that's when the worry starts slipping in, because Leclerc and Perez are then having, an amazing battle, and they're actually closing in just on Lewis Hamilton as he starts to slip away from Max Verstappen. And I don't know, in those 5 or 6 laps left, or a couple of laps before he pitted, I don't know if he'd have been able to hold on all the way to the end. So even if his tyres did last that long, which again was up for question, he was down to the canvas. I've seen some of the pictures, I'll try and pop one up on the screen, but he was down to the canvas on his front right. If that would have gone, he'd have been in the wall and lost everything, and lost out big time to Max Verstappen. It would have been 16 points in the championship. But it felt like the right decision to pit, but he left it far too late. He needed to do it 20-30 laps prior. But I do fully understand the reasoning and the whole aspect why his lap times were there. It's just they weren't quite there with 5 or 6 laps to go when he was losing ground to Max. It was then 5.6 to 6 seconds at one point, with Leclerc and Perez closing in. That got to 10 seconds, and at that point they were under threat from Gasly, so if they actually did pit, they'd have lost the position to Pierre and been P6, which would have just been a disaster. So I can fully understand Hamilton's frustrations and why they stayed out. But with the benefit of hindsight and what they're going to talk about in the debrief, they should have come in just that little bit earlier. And with that, that is my review all done and dusted. Just the driver of the day considerations to go through, and other than Hamilton and Sainz, maybe even Bottas, there really isn't anyone else it can go to other than Carlos Sainz. It was just a really, really superb drive. To come from last all the way to well inside the points, that was absolutely spectacular. Perhaps if Hamilton had stayed out and made it all the way to the end on those slick immediate tyres to grab that podium, he would be driver of the day, but who knows, that's the way it goes. For me, Carlos Sainz, driver of the day. Please let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this Turkish Grand Prix and who was your driver of the day as well. But that is all I got for you today, guys. I hope you have enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next episode with whatever and whenever I decide to make it. I'll see you guys then.